All right, good people. So the Philly Fan Expo is coming up, and that guest list is looking pretty sick. So let's take a look at it. All right, what's going on, good people? It's Main One Collector coming at you with another video. And if you like this video, click like and subscribe. I appreciate it, and it helps out the channel greatly. Well, it's going to be that time of the year again where my love-hate relationship with the Philly Fan Expo continues. Now, as stated in other previous videos, I really preferred this show when it was owned by Wizard World. And, I got to be real, most of my gripes come from, the lack of space. They don't use the bigger side of the building, so, it just feels small, space-wise. And by the way, the convention center is huge, but they only use a smaller portion, and most of the floor space is geared towards the celebrity signings, so it's less for the artists and vendors. And the other gripe is the poor handling of time slots for those celebrity signings. I did a video, you could be there for hours in a queue just waiting for signatures. So that's something that I feel they could handle better. Now, that being said, I was on the fence about going this year, and, I was juggling around if I was going or not. But then what happens? William Shatner had announced the appearance. And, at his age, I don't know if he would be willing to fly to the East Coast, in the future for any more shows. So I told myself I got to jump on that. I do have one William Shatner autograph on a Sdcc graded Star Trek Marvel #1. And, that came back in an 8.5. And I got that book graded at New York City Comic Con at the first post-pandemic show. And William Shatner was great to deal with. It's a cool dude. And, I believe I was like the second person online. So I did catch him early. Catch him early, he's great. Now, I usually wait to buy my tickets at the door. Me and my boys, we're just lazy like that. We wait and go last minute, But then what happens? Mel Gibson announced their appearance. Then a few days later, DannyGlover announced that he was coming. And, that's a lethal weapon duel right there. And, those are some heavy Hollywood hitters. So me and the crew, we changed course and we bought our tickets ASAP. Just in case, by some rare occasion, that all the Saturday tickets would sell out, which would be a first for the Philly Fan Expo. So, just to get that covered, we bought our tickets early this year. And after that, who announces? John Cena announced that he's coming. And that dude is wrestling royalty. And with his appearances in Fast and the Furious and The Peacemaker, he cemented his place in geek history. So if you got the cash, I guess you can see him. You go in there and go see John Cena. I was having a conversation with my collecting buddies, my circle, and I predicted this a while ago. I said with the wildfires that hit a large portion of LA County last year, you might see a lot more celebrities willing to do con appearances as a quick revenue source. Now that's great, for us, the fans, if you want something signed, because I was looking at that guest list for the Fan Expo and MegaCon in Orlando, and that was jam-packed with appearances. And it seems that Philly is following suit. So now I'm going on record. I'm predicting that for the next major shows, San Diego Comic-Con, New York City Comic-Con, you'll probably see a ton of appearances, probably a bunch of A-listers doing signings, But I digress. Let me get back to the Philly show, So we also got DolphLundgren, and, I would love to get a signature from this dude. He has been in a bunch of different films. The man has a large body of work. What we got? We got Rocky merchandise. You got The Punisher, Masters of the Universe, Aquaman, The Expendables, a bunch of 80s movies. And, so that's going to be kind of hard to choose what you want to get signed by him. And this past week, cast members from the Back to the Future franchise announced appearances. So we got Christopher Lloyd as Doc. You got the original Jennifer and Mr. Strickland. I'm really hoping that Michael J. Fox is going to be making an announcement late. Hopefully he'll be a late addition, because I really do need a Michael J. Fox autograph in my collection. I got that Hot Toys DeLorean. I got Marty figures. I just need an autograph to make that collection complete, And let's see, who else do we have appearing? Oh, you have the main man, GianCarloEsposito. I really appreciate this thespian. Whenever I saw him at any of the cons last year, his fan interaction is second to none. I legitimately feel that he loves being at a con. And, he has raised his geek con status, a ton, with his Star Wars, Marvel appearances, Breaking Bad. And, I've been watching a bunch of his appearances on the Netflix shows, like The Residents. I found that very entertaining. And let's see, who else do I have? Oh, how can I not give the devil his due? We got an appearance by Charlie Cox, hot off of the heels of the Disney Plus Born Again series, and that finale was pretty good. Kingpin is a scary dude. I love that show, and they set it up for the sequel, which is going to be great. Now, we also have Anthony Daniels, C-3PO of Star Wars fame, and you got John Boyega with his Star Wars appearance as Finn and Pacific Rim's roles. I've been hoping for a third sequel for Pacific Rim, but, I just don't think that's going to happen. Now, it seems to me that if you do a Star Wars or Marvel appearance and it's well received, you could pretty much, write your own check. It's an appearance at any big con and you'll draw a crowd, instant revenue source. So if you do Star Wars or Marvel, you're good. Let's see who else we got appearing. We got a 80s staple, Steve Guttenberg, from mainly Police Academy fame. Thinking about Police Academy, that's a movie that you could probably never make today. It would be really hard to remake that in today's PC culture. Somebody probably get canceled doing that movie. I also saw a late edition was John Carpenter. Now John has made some great cinematic character-driven films. That first Halloween, Michael Myers was a masterpiece. We have Snake Plissken in Escape from New York, The Thing, They Live, Big Trouble in Little China, and that's a great body of work, But let's take a look. Here's the rest of the gang of celebrities that are making their appearance. Now, they have a strong list of celebrities, and I admit I like getting things signed, depending on who it is. But I also feel like where the focus is so celebrity heavy driven, other areas of the show will be lacking. I do like a well-rounded show with good vendors, good spacing of the floor, so you don't feel like you're basically pent in like cattle. And also a good list of artists. That's also key for any show. And I feel like a lot of these big shows are kind of moving away from that. I saw Scott Snyder and Greg Capullo will be making appearances, which is great. If you want to get some Batman or some Spawn books signed, Scott Hanna is also going to be there. That's great. You need some Spidey books signed, but I do feel that artist alley looks a little light. I usually would like some more old school hitters, Larry Hama, John Romita Jr., Bob McLeod. But I have found that sometimes with the Philly show, a few artists will be late additions. You might get some last minute announcements, or the day of the show, they might just pop up. So I'm hoping that'll be the case here. I'm actually excited to see what the show will hold this year, and I'm hoping it doesn't disappoint. But either way, I'll be in some good company for the road trip. And if worse comes to worse, we'll get some great food in Philly, some cheesesteaks, hit up a local Ollie's or Ross for some cheap figures. And, hit Mitchell and Ness, find me some more Nycc gear, piss off a couple of 76ers fans. Those Eagle fans are pretty obnoxious, so I'm not messing with them. Not this year anyway. Well, that's my time, people. If you like this video, click like and subscribe. I appreciate you. Thanks a lot. Main One Collector out.